They said the land was cursed, but fear did worse than any ghost. I'd been riding 3 days when the wind first carried the smell of ash. The town of Grayhill lay ahead, crouched beneath a sky the color of gunmetal. Every window shuddered like it was hiding from memory. My grandmother used to whisper about this place between sips of whiskey and guilt. Said she'd left behind something silver and shameful. When I dismounted, the dust clung to my boots as if it recognized me. Folks on the porch of the saloon went quiet. One old man spat sideways, eyes fixed on the bracelet at my wrist. Her bracelet. A thin band of tarnished silver, carved with swirls that caught the light like quicksilver. "Where'd you get that?" he asked, voice scraping like gravel. "It was my grandmother's," I said. "Ruth Thorne." The name rolled out and the air seemed to tighten. Someone muttered a prayer, another made the sign of the cross. I thought maybe they'd gone mad with the heat. But when the woman by the well dropped her bucket and ran, the rest followed like cattle spooked by lightning. They didn't ask me another thing. They just started moving, a tide of fear and superstition. Rough hands grabbed me before I could mount back up. "You shouldn't have come back here," a man hissed in my ear. "That thing you wear, it brought death once. Don't bring it twice." They dragged me through the square toward the outskirts where the earth turned black. The ground there was burned smooth like glass left after a wildfire. I stumbled, choking on the smoke that still lived in the dirt. "What is this place?" I gasped. "The field," someone said behind me, "where your kin called down hell." I tried to laugh, to talk sense, but the sound died under their chanting. It wasn't words I recognized, just rhythm and rage. They circled me, faces twisting in torchlight, eyes wide as if staring straight at the devil. When the first stone hit my shoulder, disbelief held me still. I thought if I just explained, if I spoke calm and clear, they'd listen. "It's just a bracelet," I cried. "It's metal, not magic." But reason didn't belong here. Fear ruled, and fear doesn't negotiate. The second stone split my lip. I tasted copper, dust, and panic. They dragged me to a wooden post charred black from old fire. A woman shoved a lantern into a man's hand and whispered something that made him tremble. The flame flickered, reflected in every pair of eyes around me. I thought of my grandmother then, the quiet tremor in her hands when she warned me never to wear this thing in the open. How she said it was part of a death the land never forgave. I'd laughed back then, thinking she was drunk on her own stories. Now I wasn't so sure. The crowd pressed closer. A man raised the lantern high. I could see my reflection in the glass, wild-eyed, bound, dust-streaked. A single spark jumped from the wick, and the mob gasped as if the earth had spoken. Then I heard it. Not thunder, not wind, something heavier, echoing across the ridge. A horse's cry. The sound of hooves coming fast.
From the ridge, the Ghost Rider saw history light its torch again. I ain't sure what drew me back that night. Maybe the wind, maybe guilt's cruel tether. Either way, my horse stopped before I told him to. Down below, Grayhill looked like a fever dream. The crowd was back at the field, same as all those years ago, when the flames took my wife and boy. And there she was, a young woman, bound to the same black post, the same cursed field. A sliver of silver caught the lantern light, and I felt my gut turn to iron. That damned bracelet. I'd buried it myself, or thought I had. The girl struggled, her voice lost beneath the crowd's chanting. I could hear 'em clear even from here, the same words, the same blind rhythm, like they'd rehearsed damnation for decades. My hands started to shake. I thought I'd spent all my fear in the fire that took my family, but watching 'em now, watching her, I knew fear wasn't the only ghost I carried. I'd left town that night, they said, haunted. Maybe they were right. I'd been living with ghosts ever since. I remembered my wife's face, pale with soot and disbelief, my boy reaching for me through the smoke before the house fell in, and that bracelet hanging from her wrist, gleaming through the fire like it was smiling. The curse, they said, started there. But I know better. It wasn't the silver that burned us, it was the people. I shifted the rifle across my saddle, feeling its weight. Been years since I held it for anything other than memory, but the sight of that mob, torches raised, hate thick as smoke, turned memory into mission. The lantern swayed over the girl's head. One of 'em, Jeb, the preacher's boy, turned drunk, held it high, whispering nonsense about purging evil. I'd seen that look before, when men traded thought for fever. My horse stomped, restless. He felt it too, the madness in the air. I could have turned away, told myself she wasn't mine to save, that the past wasn't worth reopening. But the truth was, I'd already lost everything once to this town's superstition. I wasn't about to let 'em kill another soul just to feed their fear. I took aim, breath slow, finger trembling against the trigger. The firelight danced across my scope, catching the silver band around her wrist. Through the sights, I saw her eyes, terrified, searching, alive. That was enough. The rifle cracked like thunder splitting the night. Down below, the lantern shattered, sparks flaring, screams rising. The mob scattered, dropping their torches, stumbling into the dark like sinners caught in daylight. The girl dropped to her knees, untouched, but trembling. Smoke curled upward, thick and acrid. I chambered another round, scanning the field for movement. But what I felt wasn't triumph. It was the old ache again, the one that never healed right. I'd stopped at death, sure, but in Gray Hill, mercy always came with consequence. Because if they saw me ride down now, they'd remember my name, and they'd remember what I did the last time this curse came calling. So I kicked my horse forward, straight into the firelight. One rifle cracked, and the curse cracked with it. I remember the moment clear as if the sound still echoes inside me. The mob froze mid-breath. A lantern burst apart, raining down shards of flame that died in the dirt. I could smell smoke and gunpowder, sharp as truth. Through the haze a rider appeared, dark coat, gray beard, eyes like the barrel of his gun. The villagers whispered one name as they fell back. Harland. He dismounted slow, deliberate, as though time had finally stopped running from him. His rifle still smoked. He looked at me, not with pity, but with recognition, like he'd been expecting me. "You hurt?" he asked. My throat refused to answer. I was bound at the wrists, rope cutting into my skin, but I shook my head. The crowd had gone quiet, unsure whether to flee or strike. Their fear had turned brittle. One man, the same who'd held the lantern, lunged forward. "She's a witch, Jack. You know what that silver means." Jack's rifle raised so fast it silenced the argument before it began. "What it means is you're all too damn scared to face the truth." He cut my ropes with a hunting knife, the steel glinting in what light remained. My wrists burned as the blood came back. I staggered to my feet.
The wind carried the ash of old fires across the field, and for a moment it felt like the earth was remembering something with us. Jack turned to the townsfolk. "You think fire cleanses? It don't. It only hides the rot until someone digs it up again." Nobody moved. Not a word, not a breath, just the sound of the wind scraping across the bones of that scorched ground. Then Jack reached down, pulled me gently by the arm. "Come on," he said, "before they remember how to hate again." He moved quick through the dark, his horse following without a command. Behind us, the crowd broke apart like frightened cattle. No one dared chase. Maybe they thought the ghost rider really was dead, or maybe they were afraid of what he might do next. At the edge of the ridge, he stopped and looked back one last time. The torches were gone, but the field still glowed faintly, heat beneath the ashes. "You shouldn't have come here," he said quietly. "I didn't come for them. I came for answers." He nodded, like he understood that kind of hunger. "Then you best start asking the right questions. That bracelet, it's older than your memory, and it's got blood on it." I looked down at the silver glinting on my wrist. The same swirling etchings my grandmother said were a family shame written in metal. "What kind of blood?" I asked. Jack's eyes flickered toward the valley where shadows moved like smoke between the burned trees. "The kind that don't wash off easy," he said. He swung into the saddle and offered me his hand. "If you want the truth, you ride with me, but once you do, there's no turning back to innocence." I took his hand, because whatever curse haunted this land, it was time someone rode straight into it.
The wind outside sounded like the curse whispering through her dreams. Jack's cabin sat tucked beneath a crown of pines, half swallowed by moss and time. Inside, the air smelled of oil, old tobacco, and something faintly sweet, like decay disguised as comfort. He poured me water from a dented canteen, his movements slow, methodical, as though afraid the past might hear us. Neither of us spoke for a long while. My wrists still stung from the ropes, and the silence made me aware of every heartbeat. Finally, he said, "The last time that bracelet showed itself, Gray Hill burned, so I'll ask once, why bring it here?" "It belonged to my grandmother," I said. "She told me to find where it came from, to understand it." He laughed without humor. "Understanding ain't what this town does. It buries. That's why it still smells of smoke." The fire cracked between us, throwing light against the walls, and I noticed carvings etched into the wood. Circles, symbols, names half scraped away. One name repeated twice, S. Crow. Before I could ask, Jack looked up. "Don't touch those." Something in his tone froze me mid-reach. "Who's S. Crow?" He didn't answer, just stared into the flames like he could see a different night burning there. Outside, the pine shifted, whispering. The one rose until it sounded almost like voices. I told myself it was just exhaustion. 3 nights on the trail, the mob, the fear. My mind was inventing ghosts to keep itself company. But when I finally laid down on the cot in the corner, the air grew colder, as if the cabin had exhaled all its warmth. I must have drifted, because the next thing I knew, I was speaking in my sleep. I could hear my own voice, faint but certain. I whispered, "Go deeper, make it quick inside." I woke with a start.
Jack sat across from me, gun resting across his knees. The fire was dying, casting just enough glow to show the worry in his face. "What did I say?" I asked, my voice raw. He didn't look at me right away. Something a miner said once, before the ground swallowed him whole. I felt a chill trace my spine. "You think I know him?" He said, "I think you're dreaming someone else's memories. That bracelet, maybe it's not cursed, maybe it's a key." The words landed heavy. I wanted to throw the thing into the fire right then, watch it melt into nothing, but some part of me knew that would only bury the truth again. So instead, I clenched it tighter. The metal felt almost warm, pulsing faintly against my skin. Jack rose, checking the window slit. He said, "We'll ride at dawn. There's one man left who might know what really happened here, and if he's still alive, he'll be waiting at Crow Farm." I nodded, but my eyes stayed on the firelight flickering across the bracelet. For a moment, I swore I saw something reflected there. Not my face, but a man's silhouette digging in the dark. Then the light blinked out.
One name in silver turned a ghost story into a map. Dawn came thin and gray, the kind that makes everything look like it's been washed in sorrow. Jack was already saddled up, hat low, rifle strapped across his back. The fire from the night before had burned down to a small, steady coal, the kind that could start a new blaze if fed the right fuel. I traced my thumb over the bracelet. The letters S. Crow had always been faint, but now they gleamed as if the metal itself remembered being named. "You said there's a man left?" I asked, tightening my coat. "Silas Crow?" Jack's jaw set like stone. "Aye. He owned the land where the fire started, where your grandmother lived. Folks said the curse began with him, but I reckon it ended with everyone who believed that lie." He kicked his horse forward and I followed. The trail wound through blackened timber and hollow wind. Birds wouldn't even roost here. The silence was so thick it felt like riding through a graveyard where the headstones hadn't bothered to rise. After a mile or two, I asked, "What really happened that night, Jack? My grandmother never spoke of it straight." He took a while to answer. "They said she caused it, called down fire with that bracelet, but truth is there'd been digging. Crow was looking for silver. The earth caved in, set off a spark in the shaft. The blast took half the valley." I stared at the burned horizon. A mine collapse. That's what this was all along? Maybe. But when men lose loved ones, they need to blame something they can hate. You can't hate rock or greed, so they blamed your bloodline instead. I felt something inside me twist. Anger, sorrow, both at once. Then why keep the lie alive? Because lies age better than guilt. The ruins of Crow Farm came into view by midday. Blackened timbers jutting from the dirt like broken ribs. The wind carried the smell of rust and old smoke. My horse balked. Jack dismounted first. "Stay sharp," he said. Silas was never one for forgiveness. We stepped through what had once been a gate. The ground crunched beneath our boots. Shards of pottery, bits of bone, a child's shoe half buried in ash. I knelt, fingers brushing the soil. "My grandmother was here." Jack nodded. "She was. Tried to warn him, they say. Told him to stop digging. But greed don't listen. It just echoes." There was movement ahead.
Faint, a creak of wood that didn't belong to the wind. Jack's hand went to his holster. And then, in the open doorway of the collapsed barn, a shadow moved. Slow, deliberate. An old man stepped out, tall even in ruin, hair white as dust. He leaned on a rusted shovel like a preacher leaning on sin. I was wondering when the thorn blood would come back to finish what it started. I clenched my fingers around the bracelet. "Silas Crow?" He smiled, thin and knowing. "Aye, and I reckon you've come to dig up what should have stayed buried." Jack shifted his stance. "We're here for the truth, Crow." He laughed. "Truth's just another kind of curse, son." The shovel's metal edge caught the light, the same cruel gleam as the bracelet on my wrist.
The curse wasn't born, it was built. Silas Crow stood framed by the ruins, the sunlight cutting his face into shadow and scar. His eyes carried the same fever I'd seen in the mob, that hunger to rewrite guilt into legend. Jack leveled his rifle, though the old man didn't flinch. "You started this," Jack said. "All of it. You and your damn mine." Silas spat into the dust. "Mine collapsed because your people didn't listen. They dug where they shouldn't. You think I made up a curse for fun? It kept fools from dying down there again." I stepped forward holding out the bracelet. "Then why brand my family with it?" He looked at it like it was a snake ready to strike. "Because your grandmother knew. She was there when the first fire broke. She begged me to seal it off, but when the bodies came up burned, the town wanted a reason, so I gave 'em one. Her bloodline carried it better than mine ever could." I felt something cold coil in my chest. "You let them kill her reputation to save yourself." He smiled sadly. "I let them survive their own shame." Jack took a step closer. "You call that mercy?" Silas's eyes flicked to him. "You were there too, Harland. Don't forget. You helped spread the story. You needed someone to blame for your loss." Jack froze. For a heartbeat, the gun lowered. "You're lying." Silas's voice was calm, almost kind. "You told them Ruth Thorne cursed the field, didn't you? You wanted to believe it, because otherwise you burned your own house running from truth." The silence that followed felt heavier than any bullet. Jack's face drained of color. "Tell me it's not true," I said. But I already knew. His eyes gave it away, that haunted look he wore since the ridge. He looked at me then, voice low. I was half mad with grief. I didn't mean for it to spread like that. "You meant enough," Silas said, "and once a lie starts walking, no man can tall it back." I couldn't breathe. The bracelet on my wrist felt suddenly heavier, pulling down my arm. "All these years, all this blood over your cowardice." Silas turned away, limping toward the doorway. "You wanted truth, there it is. Bury it again or it'll bury you." Jack lunged, grabbing the shovel from Silas's hand. "You'll face this, Crow." They struggled, two ghosts fighting for the last word of a story that had already written them both in ash. The shovel struck the wall, sending a cloud of soot into the air. I stumbled back, coughing, until my hand brushed something in the rubble. A leather-bound book, half burned but intact. I opened it. The pages were scrawled in Silas's handwriting, ledgers, notes, confessions, and at the heart of it, a single entry. "Cave-in due to gas pocket, ignited by lantern, blamed Thorne to quiet the town." I read it aloud. The words echoed through the ruins like a judgment. Silas stopped struggling. Jack's grip slackened. The old man looked hollow suddenly, as if the truth had finally stripped him of his power. "You wrote it. You made the curse." He didn't deny it, just stared at the ground. Sometimes lies keep peace, he whispered. I shook my head. No, they just keep the fire smoldering. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley, low and distant. Jack looked at me, eyes wet with something between rage and regret. What now? He asked. I closed the diary and tucked it under my arm. Now we burn the story itself.
Sometimes you burn the story to make room for the truth. We waited until nightfall. The sky hung low and red, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Jack built the fire in the center of the ruin, quiet, deliberate. Silas watched from the porch, his face unreadable in the flicker. I laid the diary beside the silver bracelet, two objects heavy with ghosts, both forged from fear. Jack poured a splash of whiskey on the flames, and the fire leapt high, licking at the blackened beams. "You sure?" he asked. "There's no taking this back." "I'm not here to take anything back," I said, "only to end it." The metal caught light first, orange bleeding into white. The bracelet hissed, twisted, then began to melt. For a heartbeat, I swore it screamed, or maybe that was me, finally letting go of what I'd carried across 100 miles of desert and doubt. Silas turned away, voice barely a rasp. "You think burning proof changes the past?" "No," I said, "but it keeps the next poor soul from dying for it." He didn't answer, just stared into the dark, hands trembling. "Your grandmother tried that once. Fire couldn't save her either." Jack stepped forward, jaw tight. "She didn't have someone to stand with her." The flames roared higher, reflecting in his eyes. The same man who'd once let superstition drive his grief, now watching it die by his own hand. I saw peace flicker there, faint as an ember, but real. Silas limped closer, stopping just outside the circle of light. "You think you're free now? You'll never outrun what you were born from." "Maybe," I said, "but I can ride beyond what you made." He gave a thin smile, not mockery, but surrender. "Then you're already luckier than the rest of us." He dropped his shovel into the fire. The iron glowed red, then fell still, swallowed by heat. We stood in silence, three survivors of the same lie, each watching something different burn. When the flames began to fade, Jack knelt and brushed the ashes aside. "Look," he said. Beneath the soot, a small vein of silver ran through the ground. Not jewelry, not ornament, raw ore, the kind men kill each other to claim. Silas saw it too. "That's what started it all," he whispered. "The earth's own glitter." I met his gaze. "Then let it stay buried." Jack poured the last of his whiskey over the ashes. The fire hissed, died down to a soft glow. Smoke curled up into the night sky, carrying the story away one breath at a time. Silas turned his back on the ruins and walked into the dark, disappearing like a shadow losing its shape. Jack looked at me, voice rough. "You think that's the end of it?" I watched the last ember blink out. "It's the end of the curse. The rest we'll have to write ourselves." He nodded slowly. "Then we ride at first light."
Every curse is just a story waiting for someone brave enough to rewrite it. Morning came soft and gold, the kind of light that made even ruin look forgiven. The smoke from the night's fire drifted thin across the valley, tracing lazy ribbons through the air. Where the field had burned, a new green shimmered faint beneath the ash, stubborn, small, but alive. Jack stood beside his horse, rolling a cigarette he never lit. I could tell he wasn't a man who believed in clean slates, just quieter pages. "You sure you don't want to keep that?" he asked, nodding to the spot where the bracelet had melted into the dirt. I shook my head. "Let the ground keep it.
Feels like it belonged to the earth more than to us. He smiled, faint as dawn. That's the smartest thing anyone said in this town in 30 years. We saddled up in silence. Behind us, Crow Farm was nothing but a skeleton of smoke and cinder. Somewhere out there, Silas was walking whatever road guilty men take when the story finally spits 'em out. I looked down at my hands, free as silver, but not a memory. You think people'll ever stop calling it cursed? Jack exhaled, slow. Maybe not, but maybe one day they'll tell it different. He nudged his horse forward, and I followed, the two of us riding through the hush of morning. The sun broke full over the ridge, turning every piece of scorched wood into gold. For the first time since I arrived, Gray Hill looked like a place worth forgiving. The wind caught my hair, carrying the smell of pine instead of smoke. I thought of my grandmother, how she must have carried the same shame, the same hope, that someone someday would come back and finish the story right. Maybe that someone was me. Jack glanced over, a ghost of a grin beneath his beard. You know, he said, folks'll talk when they see us riding out together. They'll make up their own ending. Let 'em, I said, long as it's not the same one twice. He chuckled, the sound rough but real, the kind of laughter that sounded like release. We crested the ridge and the whole valley opened beneath us, hills unscarred by superstition, a sky wide enough to hold second chances. I didn't look back. Some stories don't need witnesses, only survivors. The road stretched ahead, endless and sunlit. Jack tipped his hat against the glare, and I felt a calm I hadn't known since before Gray Hill's name meant fear. 2 riders, 1 truth, and a land finally quiet. As we rode on, the ashes behind us caught a breeze, scattering like dust returning home.